Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. I am back with the last few rebuttals to the comments that I received on my post about shot credentials. If you do not have any idea what I'm talking about, I will link the first video in this series below. Essentially, a couple weeks ago made a post about my feelings on shot credentials. I feel as though it was a thoughtfully written, respectful post, and I received a great deal of pushback from individuals who kind of personally attacked me, which is well within their right, but I shortly thereafter decided to make a YouTube channel, not just to talk about this issue, but I thought it would be a great issue to start with, and it would allow me to discuss things in a way that isn't always achievable through comments on social media. I understand that the individuals who left these comments probably aren't going to see this. One of them is blocked, which is unfortunate because all of these individuals I used to be very close with, but I understand they're not going to see this, but I see this kind of rhetoric from these comments a lot online and on articles in the media, and I thought it would be a good thing to discuss. So I'm gonna dive right in. First off, I want to say thank you though to everyone who's been watching my videos. I started my channel a little over a week ago, and I have 250 views or something, which I know is probably a joke to a lot of people, but it's not a joke to me. And it has been, I can't describe, I don't want to be dramatic. I'm always really worried about how people are going to take things, and I feel like I have to over-explain myself, but more than I can say. Having the platform and the ability to share my views. Not just because I want attention or because I need my views out there, but because I have kept them quiet for what feels like so long because I've been afraid of people not liking me. And I've seen that people don't like me when they hear about a view I have. And it will just erase every positive interaction we had in real life, even though I'm still the same person. I don't believe any of my views are controversial. I know they're controversial, but I don't believe that they inherently are. I don't believe any of my views are racist or bigoted or whatever. But people just want to jump to calling you names. People want you to agree with every single thing that you are supposed to agree with right now, every single acceptable viewpoint. And if you don't, especially if you have a certain skin color, it's easy to just, you're racist, you're selfish, you're a capitalist. And I don't even know what to say. It's just been hard to deal with. I feel like I have to closet an entire part of myself in order for people to like me. So having this platform, even if just a few people watch it, it really means the world to me. So I'm gonna go ahead and jump in because I'm just rambling now. I don't know what else to say, but so the first comment of this video is, don't pretend you're being any less divisive by ignoring the dangers of a global pandemic because you personally are young and healthy. Number one, thank you for calling me young. I appreciate that. Thank you for calling me healthy. I assume I'm healthy. I don't know. I don't have access to great medical care. I don't get physicals, but I appreciate that I look healthy to you. Thank you for that. And this reference to don't pretend you're being any less divisive is, of course, a reference to the fact that I brought up the fact that shot credentials, if we enact those on a large scale, they're going to be incredibly divisive. And if you think that masks are and were divisive, were politicized to mean far more than just what they may or may not have meant scientifically, shot credentials, if we enact those on a large scale, are going to be masks times 10. And we're not going to have a certain man to blame it on, who we love to blame everything on, because he's no longer in office. So we're going to have to find someone else to blame for this incredible divisiveness. And frankly, I think that person to blame is going to be in the mirror. CHOT credentials, they're going to allow for medical apartheid, for medical discrimination, for segregation. They are going to create a two-tiered society where people who have the shot are given preference over people who don't have the shot. And that is unacceptable. And we should know that from history. And you might think, well, when segregation happened historically, it was based off of immutable characteristics, so it wasn't fair. It was based off of skin color, which is an immutable characteristic. You are born with it. You cannot change it, even if you wanted to. It's not acceptable. However, the shot, and I have touched on this in another video, we don't have safety data for every single demographic of the population. You can go right on the CDC website, and it is linked in another video of mine. I'll link it below, where I spoke about the fact that the CDC is not telling any group to not take the shot. They're not saying don't take it, God forbid. But they are telling you that if you're HIV positive, if you have autoimmune disorder, if you are pregnant, or if you take the shot and later become pregnant, you need to understand that there is limited safety data for your demographic. So is it fair to penalize people who have less safety data than you might have with this shot? Is that fair? Those people can still choose to take the shot, but they don't have the same reassurance that maybe you feel like you have. And those are immutable characteristics, you know, having autoimmune disorder and HIV, etc. And so is it fair? Is it fair to penalize people who have certain religious beliefs that make them have certain feelings about the shot? Is that fair? Is that right? Is that justified over a disease that for most of the population has a 99% survival rate? Is that right? And frankly, look, I don't think our country can take any more divisiveness. I think it could very well be lethal. I think if we enact shot credentials, it could be the beginning of either a peaceful or a not so peaceful divorce in the United States, and I don't want to see that happen. I don't think it is the road to go down. Continue doing the exact same thing we're doing and expecting different results, which is the definition of insanity. We can continue showing celebrities getting their shots and you showing your selfie getting your shot, which is totally fine. And we can continue shaming people for not getting the shot and for being worried. Or we can have an adult conversation about what people's rights are and why they're concerned about the shot, and people's ability to weigh their own cost-benefit analysis. So I guess, you know, the choice is ours. But yeah, I don't think people are going to take shot credentials. We've all given up so much over the last year, every single one of us. But people can only take so much. And people do not, it is unreasonable to expect people to endlessly sacrifice for the common good. So first it was, 15 days to slow the spread, and then it was, well, stay home indefinitely, and they kept extending it and extending it. And in many places, it's still kind of stay home indefinitely. And then it was, wear a mask when you go into a store, and then it was actually wear a mask anytime you go outside. Sometimes it was wear a mask in your own home. And then it was, miss a holiday with your friends and family. It's only one holiday. Okay, actually miss several holidays with your friends and family. Have friends and family pass away alone in hospitals without anyone on their deathbed. And now it is, okay, take this shot. Take this shot. It is not approved by the FDA. It is not out of clinical trials, but take the shot. It's your duty. Be a good citizen. It's for the common good. It doesn't matter if you're uncomfortable, take it. And I'm going to show you every single celebrity and every single influencer and every single person you've ever met taking it, so that you just take it. people aren't just going to endlessly accept everything. We have all lost something over the course of the last year, many things probably, and we have all given up something. And frankly, I have zero interest in saying, oh, well, you gave up more than I did, or I lost someone from C19 and you didn't, so you shouldn't be talking. Or I have a huge risk to C19 and you don't, so you shouldn't be talking. I don't have really any interest in comparing whose interest in this discussion holds more weight. The fact of the matter is we've all lost something. Incredible things we may never get back. And people aren't going to continue to lose things. You're asking people to inject themselves into their bodies with something that they're currently not comfortable with. And frankly, the publicity surrounding the shot, even from the CDC and from Fauci, the recent pull of J&J, the weird kind of, you still need to engage in all these social distancing measures and all these guidelines, even though you're fully vaccinated.
Indoors, in restaurants and bars. Is that okay now?
No, it's still not okay for the simple reason that the level of infection, the dynamics of infection in the community are still really disturbingly high. Like just yesterday, there were close to 80,000 new infections, and we've been hanging around 60, 70, 75,000. So if you're not vaccinated, please get vaccinated as soon as vaccine becomes available to you. And if you are vaccinated, please remember that you still have to be careful and not get involved in crowded situations, particularly indoors where people are not wearing masks.
So when you have an acute situation, extraordinary number of cases like we have in Michigan, the answer is not necessarily to give vaccine. In fact, we know that the vaccine will have a delayed response. The answer to that is to really close things down, to go back to our basics, to go back to where we were last spring, last summer, and to shut things down, to flatten the curve, to decrease contact with one another, to test to the extent that we have available, to contact trace. Sometimes you can't even do it at the capacity that you need. But really what we need to do in those situations is shut things down. I think if we tried to vaccinate our way out of what is happening in Michigan, we would be disappointed that it took so long for the vaccine to work to actually have the impact.
I think it's really important that we work from facts and understanding of the science around things. We know, for example, that the UK is ahead of just about everybody else on vaccinations, and yet they maintain very strong restrictions and are facing a very serious third wave. Vaccinations on their own are not enough to keep us safe. We need to engage in the right kinds of behaviors, do things that the conservatives aren't always good at, like wearing masks, keeping distances, and obeying public health rules. I think it's
I mean, it hasn't really been great, guys, and I think we can all admit that. So people have real concerns whether you feel like they are justified or not. And I do believe that shot credentials are going to be incredibly divisive if we allow them to be implemented on a large scale. So yes, commenter, who I used to be very close with, I do believe I'm being less divisive than you, because I'm actually recognizing an entire group of the population who you are failing to recognize. You are telling them that they are stupid, that they are conspiracy theorists, that they are bad citizens. I am actually recognizing them, and they are a huge portion of the population. Ergo, I am being less divisive than you are being. To just implement VPs or shot credentials to shame everyone blindly who doesn't get the shot, and to just have this black and white thinking, you are being divisive. That is divisiveness. That is making someone the other and refusing to understand where they're coming from, or the idea that they might have honest reasons for where they're coming from. So don't pretend you're being any less divisive by ignoring the dangers of a global pandemic because you're young and healthy. Look, I've probably been more locked down than you have. I have, for most of the last year, lived in one of the most locked down cities in one of the most locked down states. So that's one thing. And then number two, this is nobody's fault but my own. Well, I'm getting a phone call right now. This is not proving my point. My point was going to be that I did not have a lot of friends. I still don't. I've said that before. I didn't have a lot of friends when all this went down, okay? So I didn't have a lot of relationships. Even if I wanted to break the lockdown or ignore the dangers of a global pandemic and be selfish, I didn't have anybody to do that with, okay? So even if I wanted to, I couldn't do it. So the reality is, I am probably far more locked down than you. I have seen posts from people all throughout the last 13 months, people who are like, stay home, stay home, stay home. And I know these people are screwing random people. I'm sorry. Look, that's well within your right, but it's like, it's been insanely obvious. I've had people even tell me, you know, they're meeting people off of Tinder or whatever dating app, and then they'll turn around and say, oh, but stay home. Look, you're either staying home and following the CDC guidelines, which is to only engage in sexual encounters with people in your own household or yourself, or you're not, okay? And I'm not demonizing you, but don't turn around and demonize me because I am anti-shot credential. I have probably been more locked down than you, okay? So unemployed for the first time in my life, so I've probably been more locked down than you. If I'm ignoring the dangers of a global pandemic, I'm not doing a very good job with it because I've lost a lot, just like everyone else. So I'm not ignoring the dangers of a global pandemic. I don't know where you got that just because I am anti-VPs, anti-shot credentials. And again, you can choose the shot for yourself and still be anti-shot credentials because they do present a huge problem with medical privacy, with medical discrimination, and with divisiveness, just to name a few. Not to mention the fact that, you know, we don't even know, like I've discussed in other videos, how long immunity lasts. How long does immunity last with these shots? Does it offer immunity? We don't even know. We know that it probably makes your symptoms less. It probably lessens your symptoms, lessens the likelihood that you're going to need medical intervention if you do get C19. But we don't know what kind of antibodies it offers, what kind of immunity it offers, and how long it lasts. We have seen some 6,000 people almost who have been fully vaccinated later become positive for C19. And certainly 6,000 out of the millions who've been vaccinated, that is a small percentage. However, just last week, or 2 weeks ago, we stopped the J&J vaccine, allegedly over 6 people out of 7 million who'd received it. So are we concerned about a few out of a million, or are we not concerned about a few out of a million? And Fauci's, in his own words, his explanation for people who have been fully vaccinated later testing positive for C19 is that either, number one, their immunity has waned, their immunity from the shot has waned. No one got the shot like over 4 months ago. It's April. No one got it over 4 months ago. So either their immunity has already waned or they came into contact with new variants, he says. So should we be talking about shot credentials when we don't even know if the shot provides immunity for more than 4 months or if it provides immunity against new variants? Is it really the time to be discussing, oh yes, you need this shot before you come into my business or come into my venue or travel domestically or even travel internationally? The answer is no, okay? So don't pretend you're being any less divisive by ignoring the dangers of a global pandemic because you personally are young and healthy. I'm going to jump into other words besides my own right now, because I have spoken long enough, certainly. I found this really awesome op-ed a couple weeks ago from the Wall Street Journal. It is from two medical professionals, Martin Kulldorff, who's a professor of medicine at Harvard Medical School and a biostatistician and an epidemiologist at the Brigham and Women's Hospital. And he wrote this op-ed in conjunction with Jay Bhattacharya, who's a professor of medicine at Stanford and a research associate at the National Bureau of Economic Research. And if you only click on one link from this, again, the link's in the description, if you only click on one link from this entire video, I would recommend this being the one. It is a really brief easy to digest op-ed titled something like "Vaccine Passports Prolong Lockdowns," and it brought up a lot of points that I myself hadn't even ever really considered, points against, the inaction of VPs. So real quick, the idea that everybody needs to be vaccinated is as scientifically baseless as the idea that nobody does. COVID vaccines are essential for older, high-risk people and their caretakers and advisable for many others. But those who've been infected are already immune. The young are at low risk, and children for whom no vaccine has been approved anyway are at far less risk of death than from the flu. If authorities mandate vaccination of those who don't need it, the public will start questioning vaccines in general. And then they go on to talk about how public health is involves trust. And like anything that involves trust, it's a two-way street. The public, individuals, have to trust the government and public health officials to present unbiased information, to present honest information, and to trust them to make informed decisions. It is the job of the government and public health officials to provide the information, again, unbiased, to provide the options, to provide the resources, and then there is a certain level of trust that you have to trust individuals to make appropriate decisions for themselves.
Should oppose vaccine passports because they would somehow diminish trust in vaccines. How so?
Yes, vaccine passport is a terrible idea from a public health perspective. Public health, for two reasons. Public health is based on trust, and trust between public health officials and the public. And coercion, and vaccine passport is a form of coercion, diminishes that trust. So if people are coerced to do something, they will be less trustful. And that will not only affect the COVID vaccine and the willingness to take the COVID vaccine, which is very important for older people, but also the willingness, the trust and the willingness to take other vaccines, like childhood vaccines, which are very, very important, that we get as many people to take as possible. So for the last few decades, we have worked very, very hard to build up trust in vaccinations. And those who are pushing for vaccine passports, they are really sort of undermining that trust. And they are doing a lot more damage to the vaccinations than the small group of anti-vaxxers have ever been able to do.
It is true. We know we have a large anti-vax movement, whether you feel like that's justified or not. I feel like it's justified in many ways. I myself do not identify as anti-vax, but this is only going to strengthen that movement, because I can tell you that people who are questioning the C-19 shot are not all traditional anti-vaxxers. They're not. It's the same as how people like to say that people who are supporting the recall for our wonderful Gavin Newsom are all Republican or all Trump supporters or all whatever it is. They're not, okay? They're not. It's 2 million plus people. I can promise you from engaging with these people and engaging with people who have questions about the shot, in the first case, it's not all anti-vaxxers, and in the second case, it is not all just people who want to see a Republican governor in California. It's just not. So we're either going to continue to engage in black and white thinking, or we're going to talk to people, and we're going to deal with the issues. And we can still disagree, but you have to deal with the issues, or you're just going to color them all this one color and shame them and blame them, and you're being insane because you're doing the same crap and expecting different results. I believe that's a lot of the reason why we are seeing public trust in health officials being eroded. I don't believe it's because, there's a bunch of conspiracy theorists out there. There's a bunch of Republicans or selfish people or capitalists or whatever it is, people who are young and healthy, and so they're disregarding the dangers of a global pandemic. I don't think that's why we're seeing people en masse question Fauci and question the CDC. A lot of people claim it's because they've been wrong a lot, and I do recognize that, but really for me, and what I really think it is the reason we're seeing people question them now is because they have enacted and doubled down and encouraged these policies that are actively harming us. It is actively harming us to be locked down indefinitely. It is actively harming us to continue to miss holidays and gatherings with our loved ones. It is actively harming us to not be able to be at the deathbeds by their side of our loved ones. It is actively harming us to be told that we are not essential, to have millions of jobs gone overnight and not come back. That is actively harming us. That erodes public trust in public health officials and the government, because you feel it. You feel how you're being actively harmed, how maybe you don't have a super high risk of negative outcomes from COVID, or maybe you do, but you still see that you're being harmed by these responses to the virus. And yet Fauci refuses to recognize that. The CDC refuses to recognize that. There's been no multi-layered, complex response, even 13 months later. It has essentially been, we want to stop you from getting C19, regardless of what your risk for negative outcomes is. And that's basically all we care about. We don't care if this puts you at an increased risk for suicide, an increased risk for not being able to put food on your table, an increased risk for depression, anxiety. We don't care. The one thing we care about is dropping these numbers from C19. That erodes public trust. I want to share with you this op-ed written by Dr. Vinay Prasad, who is an American hematologist and oncologist, as well as a health researcher. He's an associate professor at UCSF. And he wrote this very interesting piece about what does follow the science mean. And I already said it, but if you click on another link from this video in the description, this would be the other one. Very well written. He's a scientist, and yet he still understands that follow the science, hashtag follow the science, is kind of bizarre. And again, this black and white thinking that I am so against. He says, at the same time, science will never be sufficient to guide choices and trade-offs. Science cannot make value judgments. Science does not determine policy. Policy is a human endeavor that combines science with values and priorities. In other words, science can help quantify the increased risk or lack thereof of school reopening on SARS-CoV-2 spread and help quantify the educational losses from continued closure. But science cannot tell you whether to open or close schools. Making the decision requires values, principles, a vision of the type of society we want to be. How much do we care about the kids that rely on public school? Is it enough to offset a theoretical but unsubstantiated risk of viral spread? On this topic, I agree with others that we have chosen poorly. And he goes on to talk about how, yes, we have to include science in public health policy and in policy. No one is saying, oh, disregard the science, it doesn't matter. But is science the only thing that influences public health policy? Because if we just follow the science, we're just doing this idea of, yes, we just have to mitigate viral spread, whatever it takes. But we're not taking into account that people are being really seriously harmed, including people who are at risk of negative outcomes of COVID, including the very people that we're allegedly trying to protect. People are being seriously harmed by our response to COVID, and science does not take that into account. People have different values, different priorities. Society is not just science all the time, you know? So I highly recommend checking out that op-ed as well. I thought it was fantastic, and again, I just really want to present to you and offer to you this idea that, yeah, we can continue to blame people for being conspiracy theorists or for being anti-science or for being selfish, or we can have an honest, real discussion that is more than just black, right or wrong. People have real concerns. People have serious concerns. People should be able to make their own cost-benefit analysis, and they should be able to take in all the information and run their own risks. By now, everyone, you know, has an adequate understanding for the most part of their own risk, and they should be able to move forward and make their own decisions because they have values and priorities that may not perfectly line up with Fauci, who wants to, you know, keep everything locked down. All right, so last point on this topic of you're not being any less divisive because you're ignoring the dangers of a pandemic because you're young and healthy. I came across another op-ed from The Telegraph, actually, a couple weeks ago. It was titled, "We should be thanking young people. We should be thanking young people, not shaming them." And I guess this op-ed was written in response to the fact that one weekend in the UK, this park or this beach had really filled up with young people who were celebrating nice weather, basically, and being young, as young people do. And I guess they had left a lot of trash behind, and from what I understand, it was because the city and officials had just not been ready for all of these young people to inundate the park or the beach, and they just hadn't had the trash receptacles to like properly accommodate the trash of all these people. But as happens on Twitter, there was a huge blow up and it became an issue. People were shaming these young people for leaving all this trash, and then they, of course, that snowballed into shaming these young people for even being in the park and at the beach at all and not being socially distanced and all this kind of thing. And this author wrote a really nuanced, well-written piece, and she says, a BMJ paper, which is a peer-reviewed journal from the British Medical Association, I quoted them in my last video, published today, said, quote, "Adolescents are at risk of inheriting a world scarred by COVID-19. Although they have been spared the most severe direct effects of the pandemic, the indirect effects of their well-being are devastating. Our young people have been confined for a year, denied proper education, and cut off from peer groups at the most critical formative time of their lives. These are no small sacrifices. Indeed, they have become harms. Our young people's mental and in some cases physical health has never been worse. That is a direct consequence of our pandemic response, and yet the same people who so readily criticize young people foolishly leaving trash in the park, and even being in the park period, that's my own words, appear to think little of the fact that we've trashed their futures. I don't think that's hyperbole. I feel for every single young person under the age of 18, they should absolutely be in school, absolutely without masks, without all these crazy measures. I am not going to get into that right now because this video is not about that. But who I really feel for in all of this is preteens and teenagers and young adults. Don't get me wrong, I feel for young kids. I think it's so dangerous that we are not allowing them to see people's facial expressions. That is so important for them to develop empathy and to understand how to interact in the world, because you can mask your verbal response. You can offer an inauthentic verbal response to something that a child does or something that a child sees. It's really hard to mask your facial features, at least initially. And that is so important for kids to learn, you know, when I do this, it makes people smile. When I do that, it makes people sad. That's important. And it's important for kids to also be around other kids their age. But at the same time, really young kids don't have anything to compare this to. They don't mind being with mom and dad. Obviously, it presents issues for mom and dad because mom and dad are suddenly homeschooling when they themselves need to go to work or find a job because they've lost their job or whatever it is. So there's real serious issues with young kids being home and out of school or being forced to wear masks and spray everything down. I've worked with young kids, okay? Those kids do not understand personal space. They don't understand health or what it is to be completely disgusting individuals. They're kids. Kids used to do the most disgusting things around me, okay? So I feel for everyone in that situation, but with preteens and with young adults, they do have something to compare to. They don't want to be home with mom and dad all the time, nor should they be. They need to be around other kids their age. They need to be figuring out the world on their own. These are kids who have lost the opportunity to go to prom and to walk in their graduation and to go to college at all in person. And look, I'm not one of those people that is like, personally, I think college is a scam. I don't think it's essential to have the college experience to have a good life. But kids have given up a lot. They've given up a lot. And if you can afford to go to college, if you get grants and loans, you should absolutely be able to have the college experience if that's something that you want to do. And it's not going to put your future at risk because you're buried by student loans. These kids have lost a lot for a disease that when you're under 18, gosh, you have essentially a 0% risk of, it is so low that it is essentially 0% risk of having negative outcomes from COVID. And it is irrational to think that these children, because that's what they are, these young adults, but still children when they're under 18, should be endlessly sacrificial to the common good. That is unreasonable to think, and you can continue to call it selfish or whatever you want to call it. You can continue to say, oh, they're ruining it for the rest of us, but how about we actually deal with the problem at hand and understand, okay, it's unreasonable for people to endlessly sacrifice for the common good. So how do we have a more multi-layered, complex response to this? How do we change our response over time from March 2020 to April 2021? Or do we not change our response over time and we just keep doing the same crap that we're doing and expecting a different result? The title says it all. We should be thanking young people, not shaming them. All right, so the gardeners in my apartment complex had come, and I was using that time. They were like right outside the window, using that time to look over the footage that I had already filmed. And I think I'm actually going to split this video into 2 videos. So look out for another video from me with the actual last comments and my actual last rebuttals, because I do really want to be respectful of people's time, and I don't want to be putting out like hour-long videos. So I said in the beginning this is going to be the last video in this series, but there's actually going to be one more, and I know you're anxiously awaiting it. So thanks so much for watching, and look out for one more piece from me. And in the meantime, speak your mind, unless you're Maxine Waters, and then maybe don't. It was a joke. It was a joke. It's a joke. But there is a time and a place to speak your mind. And I hope that our elected officials can recognize that there's a time and a place and an appropriate manner in which to speak your mind. And we need to hold people accountable for that. So thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.